This anti-diet method helped my dad lose 30 pounds in just 90 days at age 53 while eating a big bowl of ice cream every night and still enjoying the foods he loves. And it's the same method that took my body from this to this. So in this video, I'm gonna walk you through this 9-step anti-diet method my dad followed so you can finally lose your gut, get lean, and look great shirtless without ever giving up your favorite foods. Step 0 is the lens. Now, the lens is a fat loss question that you need to ask yourself that's going to set the foundation for everything that you do in your weight loss pursuits. And that question is, what's the easiest way for me to eat in a calorie deficit every single day? Now, this is step 0 because it is the foundation of everything that we're gonna be talking about in this video and everything that you should really be focusing on when it comes to fat loss. This is the lens that you want to see everything through because fundamentally, at the end of the day, the calorie deficit is all that matters. Fat loss cannot occur without it. And so for fat loss to occur, it just comes down to putting yourself in an energy deficit in order to force your body to tap into its fat stores for energy. Now, you probably know this, but the reason why most people fail is because they have not found an enjoyable and sustainable way to do this. So as far as my dad, before we did anything, we had to answer this fundamental question. We needed to find something that he could enjoy and that he could stick to. And the reason why that's so important as sort of the foundation is because whatever you do to lose fat and get in great shape is what you must continue doing for as long as you want to stay in great shape. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to be eating in a calorie deficit for the rest of your life. You would die. Fundamentally, like the difference between being in a fat loss phase and eating at maintenance or eating in a small calorie surplus to try and build muscle, it's really not that different, right? And so you cannot expect to follow a certain strategy to lose all your weight and then go back to what you were doing before because you're just gonna rebound to what you looked like before. So it's really important that like the habits and the strategy that you use to lose the fat is something that you can see yourself doing for life because otherwise it's just not going to work. You might even be able to get in great shape. You might be able to stick to your diet for the duration of however long you need to in order to lose the fat, but you're just ultimately gonna fall right back to where you were before if it's not something that you can see yourself doing and sticking to for the rest of your life. Now, step 1 is to set the right calorie intake. So once you've found the easiest way to eat in a calorie deficit every single day, you need to actually set the right calorie deficit, right? So as far as how to set the right calorie intake, it's really, really simple. The first thing that you're going to need to do is find your maintenance calories. And so your maintenance calories is essentially the amount of calories that you need to eat every single day in order to stay exactly where you are right now. So the simplest calculation for finding your maintenance calories is to take your body weight and then multiply it by 15. Now, for some of you guys, this is going to be like dead on accurate. And for some of you guys, it might not be that accurate and you might need to sort of adjust from here, but it's a really good starting point. This is going to give you a good indication of where your maintenance calories are. And so my recommendation is that if you have, let's say 10 to 20 pounds of fat to lose, you're going to do a 400 calorie deficit per day. Now, if you have 30 plus pounds to lose, you're gonna do a 600 calorie deficit per day. So just to give an example, let's say that you're 200 pounds. Your maintenance calories are going to be 3,000 calories per day. And so if you only have 10 to 20 pounds of fat to lose, then all you're gonna do is simply subtract 400 from this number, and then you're going to be left with 2,600 calories per day. And then if you have more than 30 pounds to lose, you're simply going to subtract 600 instead of 400, and you're gonna do 2,400 calories per day. So what I will say is that most guys tend to go way too low in calories, right? A lot of guys think that the more aggressive of a calorie deficit they put themselves in, the quicker they will lose weight. And that is true to a degree. But what I've found with really big calorie deficits, I'm talking like 1,000 calories plus, is that it tends to lead to a few different problems. It tends to lead to muscle and strength loss, more diet screw-ups, and unsustainable weight loss. So it causes you to regain the weight once you've lost the weight that you want to lose. And so unless you're really obese, the long road is usually faster. And this is why I recommend that if you only have 10 to 20 pounds of fat to lose, only do a 400 calorie deficit per day. And if you have 30 plus pounds to lose, you can go up to a 600 calorie deficit. But I really wouldn't go too much more than that. You know what I mean? Like small to moderate size calorie deficits tend to be a lot more sustainable, and they tend to lead to better long-term progress. Because what I've learned in my fat loss pursuits is that the long road is usually faster. It can be very tempting to want to put yourself in a really aggressive deficit in order to lose weight quicker. But again, it comes with a lot of negative downsides. You lose more muscle, you screw up your diet more because you're hungry, and you tend to gain the weight back later because you sort of starved yourself. You forced yourself down to your goal weight. So if you have more than 30 pounds to lose, you can go a little bit quicker. But if you only have 10 to 20 pounds of fat to lose, take it a little bit slower and do about a 400 calorie deficit per day. Now, step 2 is to set the right protein intake. So protein is crucial for keeping your muscle during a fat loss phase, but you really don't need as much as fitness influencers say. Optimal protein intake for building muscle is about 0.8 grams per pound of body weight. So to take the example from earlier, let's say you're 200 pounds. You're just gonna multiply that by 0.8, and that's gonna give you 160 grams. Now, as far as protein for building muscle, 0.8 grams per pound of body weight daily is as optimal as it gets. You're not going to get any more muscle building benefits by going beyond this, but where protein can really shine is for satiety. So if you're someone with a really big appetite like myself, and you struggle with staying full in a calorie deficit, you might want to bump your protein up a little bit higher to like 1 gram per pound of body weight or 1.2 grams per pound of body weight. By the way, guys, just to pause the video for a second, if you want my personal help putting this into action the same way I did for my dad, so you can lose the gut, feel proud of what you see in the mirror, and get your confidence and masculinity back, click the link in my description below and book a free call with me. On that call, we'll break down where you are now, what's keeping you stuck, and then map out a clear plan to get you where you want to be. And there's no pressure at all. It's just a real conversation to see if I can help, and whether you join or not, you'll walk away from the call with clarity and a path forward. Now, once you've found the right calorie and protein intake for you using the calculations that we just went over, you need to actually track your calories and protein, right? So if hitting the calorie deficit every single day is the most important thing when it comes to fat loss, then actually tracking those calories and making sure you're in a deficit is a very close second. So most guys think they're in a calorie deficit, but they're actually not. And that's the simple and brutal truth about why most guys do not lose weight. For most men, there's simply a massive discrepancy between what they're eating and what they think they're eating, right? So let's say you have to do 2,500 calories per day in order to lean down because that's what you set as the right calorie intake as per my recommendations and the calculation that we just did, right? Well, if you think you're hitting 2,500 calories every single day, but you're not losing weight, I can guarantee it's because you're eating way more than 2,500 calories every day. And the reason why you think you're hitting 2,500, but you're not, is because you're either not tracking things accurately or you're not tracking everything and you're letting things slip through the cracks. So when I say tracking, there are two simple steps involved. You have to weigh and then you have to log. So this means that when you're creating a meal, you have to actually weigh the ingredients that you're using, and then you have to log that weight and that food in a calorie tracking software, something like MyFitnessPal or Chronometer or whatever. That's what you have to do. And I know a lot of you guys are thinking right now, like, oh my God, that sounds like a complete pain in the ass. I don't think I'm gonna be able to do that. I don't wanna weigh my food. Trust me, I had the same sort of objection when I was first getting into this, but I also, as a result, wasted a lot of time and didn't get results. Because sure, there are ways around doing this. You know, you can learn to eyeball your calories and whatever, but like personally, I just prefer to know without a shred of doubt that I'm hitting the calorie intake that I need to hit. And the only way to do that accurately is to weigh and then log, you know, and then over time, sure, as you get, you know, very well acquainted with calorie tracking and everything, then you can sort of take your foot off the gas a little bit and you can learn to eyeball. But I've been doing this for like about a decade now, and I think that it's not a pain at all. Like at the beginning, I thought it was a serious pain in the ass, but then over time, you just get used to it and it becomes second nature. Because if you really think about this, and this is something that I tell my clients, something that I told my dad as well when I was first getting him to do this, I was like, you think this is a big pain in the ass, but dude, like, what are you doing when you're creating a meal? You're grabbing food, you're putting it in a bowl. The only difference between tracking and not tracking is simply slipping that scale underneath of the bowl. You're gonna pour the food into that bowl regardless. What's the difference between having a scale under there or not? It's the difference between you actually hitting your goals and not, really. So when you reframe it like that, it's not really that much of a pain in the ass, man. You know, and there are some other strategies that I'm gonna give you later in this video that are gonna make calorie tracking really, really easy. But that's what you have to do. You have to weigh the food that you're eating and then you have to log it, you know? And also keep in mind that everything adds up. So little bites here and there, oils, sauces, snacks throughout the day all add up. And this is where I see a lot of guys go wrong, because maybe they're tracking things accurately, but they're not tracking everything. You know, they're not accounting for everything that they put down their throat. So that can honestly be the difference between you being in a deficit and not, because you're really working with slim margins. You know what I mean? Like, you think being in a 400 calorie deficit, like 400 calories is a lot of food, but it's really not. Like, if you actually measure out what 400 calories looks like, it's not very much. And that 400 calorie deficit is the difference between you being in a deficit and losing weight and not, right? And then as far as like beyond this, like, you're just through doing this, you're also going to track your protein. So you also just want to keep an eye on, like, am I hitting the right protein intake daily or not? So by now you've set the right calorie and protein intake for you to lose fat, and you should be tracking those two things on a daily basis. Now, the fourth step is to eat balanced macros. So you need to have sufficient protein, sufficient carbs, and sufficient fats every single day. Now, carbs and fats do not make you fat. They are vital, and you need both for a multitude of factors. The first thing is testosterone. So if you cut carbs and fats, you are going to destroy your testosterone levels, and that's going to make it much harder for you to build and maintain muscle. There's also enjoyment and sustainability, right? So carbs and fats, a lot of us enjoy eating carbs and fats. I'm sure you do, right? And I'm sure cutting out carbs and fats would make your diet less enjoyable and less sustainable. So that's a very important factor to keep in mind as well. You don't want to cut out things that you love, because that's going to make your diet fail. And then the next thing is training, right? So carbs are extremely important for fueling your weight training, because you need to have your glycogen stores full. And that's what carbs do. Carbs will keep your glycogen stores full and fuel your training performance, right? And then there's also just satisfaction. So carbs and fats keep you full and satisfied. Try experimenting with removing carbs and fats and tell me if you can get full on your diet plan. I can tell you that's not going to happen. I experimented with going really low in carbs and fats and just eating a ton of protein, and no matter how, satisfying protein is, I could never get full and satisfied. And my mood also went to shit when I was not eating any carbs and fats, right? So don't necessarily worry about like tracking this. Like, don't worry. Like, a lot of people try and hit this like certain macronutrient ratio split and like trying to hit like a certain amount of grams of fats and carbs. I really wouldn't recommend doing that, because I find it just adds extra layers of complexity for no extra benefit. What I just recommend is to track your calories and protein every day, like hit that with accuracy, and then just get a balance of fats and carbs. Let them sort of fall where they fall each day. And you might notice that over time, you tend to gravitate towards either carbs or fats more. Like, for some of you guys, you might prefer to keep your carbs higher and your fats lower, or you might prefer to keep your fats higher and your carbs lower. That's something that you'll have to experiment for yourself, but I would never recommend cutting out carbs or fats. You still need a balance of them for all the reasons that we just went over. Now, step 5 is to follow a simple and repeatable eating structure. So you need to find the best eating structure for you. Now, technically, meals per day and meal timing do not really matter. You could eat 12 meals per day, or you could eat 1 meal per day. As long as the calorie and protein intake is the same, you're going to have the same outcome in terms of your fat loss. But how many meals you eat per day and when you eat them does impact your ability to hit the calorie deficit, because it impacts your satisfaction. And so it's going to depend heavily on your lifestyle and when you prefer to eat your meals. But what I would strongly recommend is that if you're someone with a really big appetite like myself, it's always better to do fewer but bigger meals each day. So instead of trying to eat like 4 or 5 meals spread throughout the day, it's better to eat 2 big meals. It's just going to keep you way more full and satisfied, because if you have a big appetite, chances are like small little meals throughout the day is just not going to do much for you. At least it doesn't do anything for me. I need to eat big meals in order to get full and satisfied, right? So keep in mind, like, the ultimate goal when it comes to fat loss is to go to bed each night feeling full and satisfied while still being in a calorie deficit. If you can find out what allows you to do that, you'll win. Like, fat loss will be done. Like, you'll have no problem losing fat. So essentially, all you have to do is just find out what allows you to do that as far as your meal structuring and your timing, and then just repeat that daily. And then that's going to make fat loss super easy. Now, as far as my dad's preferences, like, one of the main things that we did change with his diet was his meal structuring, right? Because ultimately we didn't change that much about what he was eating. We tried to keep his diet in terms of like the foods he was eating very similar to what he was already doing. But what we did change that made a big difference was his meal structure. So one big game changer for him was pushing his food later into the day and eating fewer meals. So my dad now, like before, when he was struggling with being overweight, he would eat a breakfast, and then he would eat a lunch, and then he'd eat a dinner, and then he would also like have a dessert and maybe even snacks in between. And then what we switched him to doing was to just skip breakfast and just not eat anything in the morning, just have like a tea or coffee or whatever, and then eat like a relatively substantial lunch and then a substantial dinner. So he would do 2 meals and then he would eat a dessert before bed. And that's what we found worked really well for him. As far as what I do something very similar. So I just don't eat for pretty much for half the day. And then I tend to eat something light for lunch. And then I eat a really big dinner, and then I'll have a dessert before bed. Now, step 6 is to become a uniform eater. So what I did with my dad to help him lose that 30 pounds is that once we found the structure that he liked and we found the meals that he enjoyed eating that kept him full and satisfied while being in a deficit, he just ate the same thing every single day. And the reason why he did that is because variety is not the spice of life in nutrition. And I'll tell you why. So when it comes to fat loss, we know by now that hitting the deficit is the most important thing. You need to be in a calorie deficit, end of story. Now, everybody knows that, so why do most people struggle with being in a deficit? Well, it comes down to 2 big obstacles. There's tracking and there's adherence. These are the 2 big things that you need to solve in order to solve fat loss. Tracking, which we already talked about, is are you actually hitting the calorie intake that you think you're hitting? Are you actually in a deficit? If you say you're doing 2,500, are you actually hitting 2,500 or are you doing like 3,000 or 4,000? That's tracking. Adherence just means can you actually stick to your diet day in and day out, 7 days a week for multiple weeks until you lose the fat that you need to lose? Those are the 2 things, right? So as you can see, if you're actually in a deficit and you can stick to that deficit every single day, you're going to lose fat. So the reason why I'm telling you this is because basically uniform eating the same things every day, solves both of these things. It solves tracking and adherence. As far as adherence, the reason why it's so powerful for it is because it eliminates decision fatigue and makes your diet automatic. Because if you're eating the same thing every day, you do not need to think about it. And that's really powerful for adherence, because something that drives a lot of people nuts when it comes to fat loss and dieting is having to constantly think about what they're going to eat. And it makes it so that their diet is on their mind 24/7. But if you find the structure that you like and then the meals you like and you just repeat it daily, you don't have to think about it. It's beautiful. It eliminates all friction because you're just going to eat the same things every single day, and a lot of times you're not even going to think about it at all. And then as far as tracking, it makes tracking so much easier because you get very well acquainted with the meals. So you only really have to track them a few times, and then you know how many calories are in those meals, and then you can just repeat them. You don't even have to pull out MyFitnessPal or your tracking software or anything. You literally just repeat the meals, and you know without a shred of doubt that those meals are conducive to you hitting the calorie intake that you need to hit every single day. So ultimately, the power of uniform eating is just in knowing that your diet is dialed in and that you're in the deficit and you're hitting your calorie intake and protein without needing to think about it. It's the most beautiful thing ever, man. Like, we only have so much, willpower and so much like resources to allocate towards decision making each day. So why would you waste that all on your diet? You know what I mean? Like, there are more important things that you can put that. Like, I don't even like to think about my nutrition. I just eat the same shit every day. Makes it so that I can put my resources, because we don't have, like, people think that we have decision making juice for like all these different areas of our lives, but that's not true. We have one tank that we're pulling from for all these different things that we do. So I would rather save that for the more important things in my life than just like my diet, So it makes it so much easier. And you might some of you guys might think this is restrictive because, variety is a spice of life. I love eating all these different meals and cooking. If you enjoy cooking and that's something that truly brings you joy, you can basically scratch what I just said, because essentially there's a sliding scale, right? The more variety you have in your diet, the more closely you're going to need to track things and all of that. And then the less variety you have in your diet, the less on top of the tracking you need to be. So if you're someone who really enjoys cooking and preparing things and you're okay with having to constantly track all the different ingredients and stuff, you can do that, no problem. But this is more for the people who find, nutrition sort of a pain in the ass and don't really like cooking that much. This will make a really big difference for you. This is not going to feel restrictive at all. It's going to be very freeing. And as men, we tend to be very simple creatures, right? Like, we can eat the same shit every day. We can wear the same clothes every single day, no problem. So I would strongly recommend applying that to your diet plan. It's going to make your life a lot easier. Now, step 7 is to save your calories for later in the day. And this is something that made a big difference in my dad's weight loss journey. So ultimately, the calorie deficit is what matters, not when you eat. But as I said earlier, when you eat, has a big impact on your satiety. So remember that the ultimate goal in fat loss is to go to bed feeling satisfied each night while still being in a calorie deficit. And from what I've seen for myself and working with plenty of clients is that the only way to really do that is to eat the most food in the evening. So if you can eat very light throughout the day or even fast for a good chunk of the day, it's going to give you huge freedom in the evening to eat a lot of food. And not only eat a lot of food, but eat very tasty and enjoyable meals. Because basically, saving your calories for later in the day creates the illusion of abundance. So let's say that this is when you wake up right here, and then this is when you go to bed. And let's say that you're eating really small meals, like 500 calorie meals, and you're spreading that evenly throughout the day. While you're eating plenty of meals, none of these meals are going to fill you up. None of these meals are going to be very satisfying because there's literally only 500 calories in each of them. Whereas if you, let's say, get up, and then let's say that you fast from here to here, and then maybe here you have a light 500 calorie meal. That's going to leave you with 2,000 calories to work with in this very short eating window. And that's going to create this illusion of abundance, right? Because you ate very little, if not fasted for a good chunk of the day. So then in the evening, you literally have 2,000 calories to work with. And you can do a lot with 2,000 calories. You can eat a big 1,500 meal, and then you can have like 1,500 calorie meal, and then you could have like a chocolate bar with that, or you could have like cookies or ice cream or whatever. And this is basically what we did for my dad, and it made a huge difference for him, right? Because like this, if you're someone with a big appetite, this is not going to fill you up. It's just not. Like, sure, you're eating plenty of meals throughout the day, you're spreading them evenly, but it's not going to allow you to go to bed feeling full and satisfied, because you'll only have had like a 500 calorie meal before bed. Whereas if you eat like a 1,500 calorie meal before, like in the evening before bed, which by the way doesn't make a difference in your fat loss. A lot of people think that, oh, eating in the evening is gonna destroy your fat loss pursuits. Complete bullshit, guys. If you're in the deficit by the end of the day, I don't care whether you ate all of your calories right before bed or not, you will lose weight. Like, I don't know where that myth came from. It's complete bullshit. When you eat your food, doesn't really matter, okay? Now, step 8 is to eat the foods that you love. And so with my dad, we made sure to base his diet on the foods that he loves and the foods that he was already eating before he even embarked on the dieting journey. This was a game changer for his sustainability, because there's a saying that I really love, which is, if you can't do it for a decade, then don't do it for a day. And when it comes to fitness and health, I would even take it a step further, and I would say, if you can't do it for life, then don't do it for a day. And the problem with cutting out your favorite foods is that it makes the diet by definition unsustainable, because you're cutting up the things that you like, and that makes the diet an automatic failure. So with my dad, like, he eats the meals now and the foods now that he would eat anyway, regardless of if he was dieting or not. And that's what I do for myself and for all of my clients as well. And it makes the transition really easy, because it doesn't feel like they're dieting. And that's the key. You know, with my dad, we had him eat ice cream every single day, like without fail. He ate that same bowl of ice cream every single night. And that increased his sustainability, because he enjoyed his diet. He didn't even feel like he was dieting, right? And that is the ultimate goal. And the only way to feel like you're not dieting is to not cut out the things that you like. You know, try to change as little as possible about the diet that you currently have. Try to just make the numbers make sense. And I know that sounds crazy, because the entire dieting industry is built off of completely changing your diet and trying something new. But ultimately, if we think about like human behavior and behavioral change, like the way that would have the least amount of friction would be to just consume most of the foods that you're eating now, unless you're just, you know, slamming McDonald's 4 times a day. Then you're gonna have to change some shit. But most of you are probably not doing that. You're just eating too much, right? You're eating probably the right foods. You're not tracking your calories. You're not in the right calorie intake, right? So all you have to do is then just make the numbers make sense. So I would honestly recommend, don't change that much about what you're doing, because it's gonna make the transition a lot easier into the diet. And then all you have to do is then make the numbers make sense and just track what you're eating. Now, step 9 is to get locked in. So fat loss is all about momentum. This is something that I don't think anyone else in the fitness industry talks about, but it's one of the most powerful lessons that I've learned in fitness and fat loss. It is all a momentum game. And so there's a metaphor that I throw around in like every single video that I always tell my clients to basically picture a stationary train, right, on a track. This is a train, and it's on a track, and you have to get it about 10 feet, right? You have to get it moving, and then you have to get it across the 10 feet, and then there's a downward slope. Basically, this is the way fat loss works, right? You have to get this train moving, which is going to take monumental energy. It's going to be really difficult to get that thing moving. And then you have to get it across that 10 feet. But once it gets across the 10 feet and it reaches the downward slope, it accelerates on its own. That's exactly how fat loss works, man. I love this analogy. I'm so fucking proud of it. That's why I use it in every video. But this is literally all you have to do. You just have to get across the 10 feet, man. And this is gonna feel really difficult. And the 10 feet, as I define it in fat loss, is really that first 2 to 3 weeks. You just have to push through that first 2 to 3 weeks where being in the calorie deficit is kind of uncomfortable and your body's resisting it. And then after that 2 to 3 weeks, you reach this point where it's just complete and utter bliss. Your body's no longer resisting the deficit. You've gotten into the routine, you've formed a rhythm, and then you just have to ride that wave, man, and it happens on its own. That's how fat loss works, man. So a lot of you guys, in essence, are not achieving your fat loss goals and your physique goals because you can't push through the initial discomfort of that first 2 to 3 weeks. That's it. Because I really, truly believe that dieting only lasts about 2 to 3 weeks and then it becomes really easy and it's really nothing, you know? So just keep this sort of analogy in mind when you're starting up the diet. It's gonna be hard at first, but once you get that train, once you get it across the 10 feet, it accelerates on its own. You just have to gain that initial momentum. If you enjoyed this video, then you're gonna love this video right here where I talk about how men over 40 can lose fat so fast it feels illegal.